The fantasy Major League Rugby season is in full swing as round two comes to a close, but did the right players pull through for our fantasy managers this week? The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vandepoele.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 6 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our league members, to the Fantasy Ruckers community members, and everyone else tuning in to talk a little bit about fantasy rugby in the MLR. And of course, with me, as always, is Matt Yee. We're missing someone, though, today, man. We are missing the big man.
We sure are.
Yeah, the guy does have a little bit of important things to take care of tonight. I will give him the pass. He does have a very important date with his girlfriend. They are celebrating 7 years, so we have to give a congrats to them. So we'll give him the pass today. But I also think that he's a little bit distraught about the 0-2 start with his Utah Warriors now. So maybe that's why he has a little bit of a cop-out here. He's not showing up tonight.
Whatever. His 0-2 start with the Utah Warriors. I'm distraught about my 0-2 start as a rock and roll fantasy rugby team. I mean, what is this? The first time I'm cracking double digits, and I get what? I don't even know. I didn't even look because I know I lost by so much. But like, it's hurting me. It's hurting me, and I've got so much to say in this show, Ryan. I've got so much.
Well, we're going to get right to it so that we can break it all down and talk about everything that happened in round two, because I think, just like you're saying, Matt, there was heartbreak, but then there was a lot of people in our league that was all pumped up with a lot of the points that were being scored this week. So I think the theme of this show as we get into it will be, I think, the tale of two types of games here that was really abundantly clear in round two, but we are going to dive into that. A little bit of a change of setting here. As you can see, I don't have the whole layout of jerseys, a little bit change up of studio. So that's a little bit of a shift. I also, you may hear our mascot in the background. That is Rucker making a little bit of noise. These days, he's talking more than a scrum half man, and
that's hard to do.
It is hard to do, but he is doing it these days. He's just fired up for the Major League Rugby season now that we're 2 rounds in and we're full go now with the fantasy rugby season. So he's just amped up. So if you do hear him, he's just talking a little bit like a 9 these days. So
but you know what? I'm happy we're matching. Rye. We both got 2 jerseys in the back. We both got 2 special jerseys in the back that are special to us separately, and I think it's great that we're on the same page.
Yeah, but I will say I am going to start trying to add all those jerseys back to the back here for you guys to look at them. And I know you guys, I've gotten a lot of comments from our listeners and to our viewers about kind of the interesting jerseys behind me. So I'll make sure to bring that back because I know that is a fan favorite. But as we get into it, we are going to break down today round 2 of the MLR. It was very exciting. We're also going to do the typical waiver wire, tell you all our league members and everyone else who's tuning in, who are the players that are available out there for our league members to pick up, who's really showing up now that we're kind of establishing these starting lineups in the MLR. I know it was a little bit tricky, especially in that first week, to kind of get through all of that. But with that being said, I think there's a little bit more clarity in round 2 and even more so heading into round 3 this week. So we're going to get into all of that and have the look ahead to those exciting matchups coming up this weekend as well. But a little bit of housekeeping stuff to go around. Firstly, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow everywhere on socials at the Fantasy Ruckers. We try to post as much fantasy rugby content as we can on those sites, so you can go on there and stay up to date. We also have a Discord channel where we upload some pretty exclusive content to our Fantasy Ruckers community members. It's quickly growing, and I know it's not a big number, but we're at 20 people now, Matt. So that's pretty good. I mean, that,
you know what, the chatter in there is always going. I mean, we're getting new members that are wondering, saying how's the fantasy matchups going? What's going on in the fantasy league? Tell us more. People talking about the games. People, being critical about the MLR and having somewhere in a safe space to kind of voice their opinion with people that are watching it alike and taking interest to it. So it's awesome. And just to add on, I mean, we're the only people talking fantasy MLR. So if you want to talk fantasy, you like MLR, that's the place to be.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you want, if exactly, that's the equation. You like fantasy, you like MLR. This is the place you need to be. Give us a follow, give us a like, subscribe to us on YouTube and on wherever you get podcasts. We're also at 14 subscribers, Matt. So this
Hey,
fantasy rugby conversation is growing, and I love to see it, because for me, it's not even about the likes and it's not about the subscribers. It just shows me that there are more people than just us 8 crazy people in this league that
yeah.
actually enjoy fantasy rugby. So we might be onto something here. So it is cool to see. So thank you, everyone, especially the Reddit community out there, r/MLR. Everyone has been so supportive with this project. So I need to put that out there up top as well.
And you know
So with
what?
that, yeah,
14 subscribers. That's more points than I got this week, I think. So,
you know what? You are onto something. I think it's more points than they've scored in both of the weeks that you've had so far.
come
So,
on. Let's
so
move on. Let's move on.
all right. So let's move on to some news and notes here before we go into round two. So some pretty fun stuff when you break down kind of the things and the movement happening around the league. First, I need to give a shout out to a user on Reddit. I don't know him personally, but the stuff that he's been posting lately, throughout the entire start of this rugby season and the off season as well. U/Stelion, and he's been keeping up with all of the roster moves, everything going on, and he does like a weekly post, and he posted the February 7th to February 13th roster moves on there, so you can have a look at that on there. He has a lot of good roster move stuff. I know that's the big thing following the MLR, is trying to keep track with all these roster moves and the rosters, just
Well,
because
it's crazy how many mid-season additions there are. I mean, I'm seeing how many mid-season signings there are. Following along with that, I mean, obviously this guy's clearly got work to do, because he's got to be finding these somewhere and putting the graphics all together. So I don't know you, we don't know you, but you're a great guy, buddy.
Yeah, so definitely a huge resource for us. Now let's go on to these next two pieces of news. The Austin Gilgronis, after this past round two, this big showing up against Old Glory DC this past week, they become the fastest team in MLR history to reach 100 points to start a season. So only after 2 matches they were able to rack up 100 points. So for fantasy managers in our league, that's a pretty tasty stat there. Maybe the Austin Gilgronis is what people thought the Giltinis were
Oh
going to be.
my, yep, yeah. I think the whole league got bamboozled. I think that's the big thing. We all drafted Giltini players, thinking Gilchrist, Mr. Gilchrist, was going to put all the funding towards that team, and you know what? We got bamboozled. Mr. Gilchrist got us, and he put everything towards the Gilgronis, and now the Gilgronis are going off. And they're probably going to win the chip. Too
Oh
early
my
to
god!
say.
Now you're going on too crazy, man. Because wait, what are you talking about, dude? Come on, whatever Gilchrist is doing has nothing to do with what the
Oh,
Giltinis and the Gilgronis are doing. So I
he's
think
putting a
they are
little more
just.
spice in that Gilgroni drink. All right.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's move on here. Last piece of news, or a couple last pieces of news here. Ed Fido, after that huge performance, for Rugby New York against Houston, scoring basically the only points for New York, he becomes the first non-place kicker in MLR history to score 100% of a winning team's points in a game. And I think you have something to say about that, because I think Sam Windsor had a bunch of
We'll get to
opportunity.
that later on, but I
But
have
that
so much to say.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool tidbit. And like I said, all of these fun facts and graphics have all been posted on r/ML Rugby. That's the official MLR site on Reddit by u/Stelium, Steeliom. Apparently he's a Toronto Arrows fan, but he's doing the God's work here, giving us
Yeah.
all the fun tidbits and roster moves and stuff like that. So
Hey, I
shout
know
out to him.
usually you got all the news, but I've got a couple things to throw in. I think we didn't catch it last week, or maybe during. Marcus Moroni, from Argentinian sevens player, joins Houston.
Yep.
So that's somebody to watch. I picked him up, and he's somebody to watch. And another sevens player, I guess the sevens players love coming to the MLR. Brock Webster, Ontario native, joins the Arrows. He signed today. And I think a few other additions as well. I'm sure that Stelio, or whatever his name was, has it all there on r/MLR.
Yeah, so make sure you check that out. He has those moves plus a bunch of other moves. And I think with just the nature of the roster moves and how much movement there is in the MLR, we can't cover all of them on a weekly
No.
basis here in the news and notes, but we will try to cover the big ones. But yes, if you want to have a breakdown of all that, u/Stelium on Reddit has all that for you. And even just the MLR community as a whole, as a resource, has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So make sure you go check that as well. So that will do it for the news and notes. Some little fun tidbits there, but we need to get into this, Matt. You've already teased it. We're 10 minutes in here. We got to start breaking down round 2. So round 2 is a fun one. I think, like I said at the top, Matt, I think for me, it was a tale of two different types of games when it comes to fantasy. Let's all remember that it was the New England Free Jacks that had the bye, so they didn't play this week. So let's hop into the first match of round 2, and that was played on a Thursday night, with it being Super Bowl weekend. And now that all being done and finished with, it's all about rugby going here on forward. But we did get lucked out here with a Thursday night matchup between the Seattle Seawolves and the Utah Warriors. It was a close one. Warriors coming up short, though, losing 20-17. Some pretty big fantasy, though, implications there as well.
Yeah, I mean, the try of the week was according to MLR was in that game. I thought Seattle Seawolves looked pretty good, and a lot of good things to see. I think the Seawolves are now maybe a team to look at for some players, and I know they weren't as good last year, but these teams continue to surprise us, and this is just one of the many close matchups this week that really gave us a show.
Yeah, so some names to go off the top of the list here that did pretty well. Chad Go of Utah, he scored 9 points there. He's a front row player. When you can get front row players who can score points like that, you're going to be in a pretty good spot, because I think you're going to have a big positional advantage over the person that you play. Because when I was breaking down these stats, for the most part, I mean, it's basically front row guys getting 1 point because they stayed on for 80, or 7, or a half point because they stayed on for 70 minutes. You're not seeing these big explosive tries unless they're getting these line out tries. But hey, when you can get it, you're not going to complain at all. You got Riekert Hadding coming in big as well, scoring. You got Nakai Penny. Hey, shout out to Wes. Nakai Penny is one of Wes's friend. He was got in there into the try zone.
Yep, that was the try of the week.
Try of the week. There it was really, really good. He ended up scoring 6.1 fantasy points. But just looking at this as a whole, Matt, not much fantasy production, with the high coming from Chad Go with 9 points.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing while I was watching this one was, I just forgot how much I hate guys on my bench putting up production, and to watch Bailey Wilson on Utah, score a try and then just really stick it to me and say, I scored it because you put me on the bench. That's how I took it. Went straight to the heart, and now I'm going to have to start him next week. So that's how it is.
Yeah, sometimes that's just how it works out. I feel like that's going to be a thing that happens throughout this season, is that there's going to be a lot of bench plays where you're like, crap, I really should have played that guy, but I didn't. I mean, we'll have a perfect example when we break down the Rugby New York game, how John in our league did not start Ed Fido this week after that huge performance. So I think there's going to be a lot of that throughout the season, where you're going to be kicking yourself. I mean, it happens in fantasy football, but I think it's going to happen even more so with fantasy rugby.
But it's even more valuable here. I mean, we're seeing just how valuable 5 points are. I mean, 5 points takes me from whatever 12 points that I had to 17 points. That's a winning week in some matchups.
No, it's true. I mean, there were some where I was statting it out, Matt, and it was just one player. One player made the difference. I mean, John was going to lose his week. John was going to lose his week until I believe it was Cliven Lauser and Will Chambers ended up getting 4.5 points and 5.6 points in a game that will continue to break down. He ended up winning his matchup against Tijuana Hookers by 6 points. So, I mean, it really doesn't take much.
No.
So in the grand scheme of things, 9 points from a front rower like Chad Go is a huge one. Let's move on to the next matchup here. Toronto Arrows, LA Guiltinis. And I know this is a match that you have a lot to pick with, Matt. I mean, it was. I think the Guiltinis were trying to make a statement afterwards, but I don't know if it's the statement that you were looking for coming off of that loss against Houston. What are your thoughts on that matchup? 31-16 for the Guiltinis.
I mean, let's hand it to the Arrows. First game at home in, I don't know, 2 years or something like that, and it was in Victoria, BC, at the Canadian Training Center. They play there. They played well. They had fans out. I think that they played well. They played quick for the most part, which helped them in the first half. And the Guillotines, again, I'm just gonna say it again. I think we got bamboozled. I think that everybody in this league, especially me, got bamboozled by drafting so many Guillotini players because their offense looks stagnant. They look better in the second half, but they are looking stagnant, and I don't like the way that they're kind of building phases and moving backwards and taking things way too deep. That's a bit too much detail, but yeah, that's one of the things, and the other thing, just for more so fantasy implication, the cards. The first week they shot themselves in the foot with cards. This week just happened that the two Guillotini players that I had just wanted to go to the sin bin the entire game. So, hey, good on you, but you screwed
And
me.
now, by the sound of your voice, Matt, it sounds like you think this is something that is going to persist, and you don't think that this is something that's going to change. You don't think that this is just early growing pains at the start of a brand new season. They were coming off of a big loss. There was a lot of pressure going up to Vancouver. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard for me to believe that they go from winning a championship in the like being one of the most dynamic teams in the MLR to this far of a fall to where we are now. I just don't think that's something that's going to persist throughout the entire 18-week season.
Yeah, you're right. It's 2 games. I think Gitto coming back will make a difference, but yeah, in terms of fantasy wise, I don't think these guys are the same explosive offense. I'm kicking myself for drafting Ryberg because Ryberg is looking like they don't
But
even
it's
want to
back to
use
the
the
same
big
point
body.
though, Matt, man. Like there's only 2 games in, dude. Like we're only 2 matches in. Like I think that the Galtinis are going to turn it around, right? Like
Hey,
I think what you're so okay, I'll put it this way. So for all of our league managers then in our league, if you own one of these if you own, let's say it's one of the guys outside of Harrison Goddard, outside of Angus Cottrell, because those guys are producing, are you dropping every other Galtinis player?
if I own Billy Meeks, Angus Cottrell, Harrison Goddard, those three you keep. Those three are guys who are in their offense, getting the ball handling, taking the ball to the line, and guys who are scoring points in fantasy.
Right.
If you have guys like me, Ryberg, Trainer, that's the two that I have that come to my mind that are really killing me. Will Chambers is somebody that actually looks good as well on the wing there. But, just to go into more detail on Ryberg, the guy was somebody who we thought, I think everybody might have thought, maybe not everybody, but at least I thought was going to be a staple of the offense. Somebody who would get gain line ball. They would used to get gain line ball, but they're just not doing that. And they're using Billy Meeks as someone to get gain line ball, which I think puts his playmaking skills to waste and kind of hurts their offense. But hey, I think those three and maybe Will Chambers are some guys you want to keep. Everybody else, I'll say it publicly for the people. Ryberg's on the block. You want Ryberg? You reach out to me. You let me know. I'll make up a deal for you.
I just have a hard time, man, getting over the fact. Like, I don't know. I feel like you might make a deal with Ryberg, or you might drop one of these Guillotini. Like, someone's gonna drop a Guillotini's guy, and they're gonna pop off in this latter half of the season. Like, I just think we're 2 rounds in. There's still so much rugby to play. This was one of the questions I was going to ask at the end is it time to hit the panic button with some of these players? Because there are some players here that are just not producing, at least after these first 2 weeks,
Yep.
as what you thought they were going to do. But I guess to your point, Matt, is that it's a bigger conversation than just the points that they're putting up. Because yes, I get it. I get that for you at least. John Ryberg hasn't put up any points. In fact, he's put up negative points.
Oh my
Jordan
gosh,
Trainer,
yep.
he's put up negative points. But I guess what the conclusion that you're coming to is not based off of that negative points. It's based off of the involvement that you're seeing on the pitch, and that's what's leading you to these determinations, and that's why you think that it's time to move from these Giltinis players. Is that the sense that you're getting?
Yeah, I think that's more so,
And you don't think
especially.
that's going to change? You
I
don't
think
think
I
that
think that's
Ryberg is
more
going to get more
specifically
involved?
with Ryberg. Do I think he's going to get more involved? Maybe, but at the same time, if I'm the Giltinis, Billy Meeks is somebody who's
So
making gain line. I'm gonna keep giving him the ball.
okay, so my question then for you, Matt, is I'm not going to say Gilgronis because I feel like that's kind of a cop out because they're the hottest team in the MLR right now. But would you rather have a Rugby Atlanta player over Giltini's players?
I mean, the way that Rugby Atlanta plays is quick and fast, and you can see that.
Would you take Rugby New York players over Gil? Like, how far are these Giltini's players falling down the list for you? Before we
it's
move on to the Legion and Jab, because right now it sounds like it's dump fire. Let's get out of the Giltinis because they are the worst team in the MLR.
I mean, hey, I'll say it this way: that if you have the four that I mentioned earlier, I'd keep them. Everybody else, I think, is you're wary picking up. You're wary. You're wary starting. Maybe you're not dropping them yet, but you're wary starting them.
Okay, I can take that. I just think I personally cannot start recommending our league members start dropping Giltini's players because they're next week where they're gonna play. Dude, who do they have coming up? They're on bye, so they're gonna go be on bye, and then they're gonna come back, and then they're gonna be a brand new team after enjoying the sun for a little bit on their off week. So we'll see coming up, but yeah, it is definitely worrisome to see the lack of production that you thought. I mean, Matt Gateau has barely played yet.
Yeah, he's hurt, but
He's
I mean,
hurt. DTH Vandermeer hasn't dressed
no,
for the Giltinis yet. So there are certain players also that aren't a part of it. So there's a lot of moving factors with this Giltinis team. I think that they're going to turn it around. And I think the draft capital that a lot of our league members spent on these guys is going to pay off eventually. But I guess you do have to weigh that cost benefit of how long you're going to be holding these guys on if you're not going to be starting them. So that's a
yeah.
good point as well.
How many
Let's
weeks
move
am
on
I
here.
going to be
Let's
taking else? That's
Let's
the
let's
real
move
question.
let's move on here to the Legion versus Dallas Jackals game. Now, I was surprised. I did not think that this one was going to be necessarily the most fun one to watch this weekend, just because I'm very skeptical about how the Dallas Jackals are going to perform this year. But it was a good one, man. It was
Yep.
high scoring. This was one of those when I told you the tale of two games, and before we start getting into this little stretch of not so good fantasy games. 37-29, man. There was a lot of scoring.
Yep.
A lot of players doing a lot of things. Let me just list here for you the guys that really performed in this matchup between the Legion and the Jackals. We have, let me just pulling up here. Conrad Aurora. I mean, he's coming through here with 11.6 points. Ryan Matyas, he was a hot commodity in our draft, 10 points.
Yep.
Huge pickup. Huge pickup by Hokie, who picked up Adrian Carls. And I was waiting. I wasn't saying anything to our league members, but I was waiting until a guy was going to pick this dude up because I believe it was for Rugby Atlanta last year. He was an absolute stud from the kicking point, and I believe he went 4 for 4 in this matchup
Yeah.
against San Diego. So obviously wasn't try scoring points, but 9.5 points straight from the boot. That's the impact kickers can have. He was able to do it. Ben Mitchell came in there with
Yes, he
7.1
did.
points. There we go. That's a nice little pickup there for you, Maddie.
Yep.
So your overall thoughts over this game? I had a lot of fun watching it, and I think there is a conclusion here about fantasy, but I'll let you go first about your initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see the Jackals keeping up with a strong team like the Legion. Ma Nanu, somebody who I thought was, is an older guy, maybe not going to play all the minutes that he's going to play, but he looked really good and looked like a really great distributor, as I thought. And I'll just cap it off with those $11 or $9. I forget how much I spent on Mitchell, but it felt like a lot. Thank goodness that was well spent, because back-to-back 5+ point weeks, I'll take that any day of the week, and he's still getting the ball. They still love giving him the ball.
And I'm not sure, Matt, if you looked at the spreadsheet about your points breakdown exactly, but Ben Mitchell was your points.
Yeah, Ben Mitchell is
because
my team.
you had James Malcolm, Yuri Van Vieren, Sam Windsor, Ma Nanu all score 1 point.
Yeah.
And then you had Johan Momsen score 3 points. And then Ryberg and Trainer come in with the -3, -4. So that puts you square at 0. And then Ben Mitchell with the
Yes,
7.1.
and
And then
that
you
just
finish
gives
with 7.1. So there you
hey
go.
that gives context to all the viewers about why I'm so salty about the Guillotines right now. But
Yeah.
so take that with maybe with a grain of salt. All my bashing on the Guillotines.
Yeah, so there we go. So that Dallas San Diego Legion matchup, a lot of fun, lots of fantasy points, and then we get into a little bit of a lull here, Matt. We'll start with the Nola Gold and Rugby Atlanta match. I was expecting, I think, a big with whenever. Especially like how you mentioned with how quickly Rugby Atlanta is playing these days, I always am going to expect that Atlanta is going to be able to put up points. Wasn't able to do it this time against the Nola Gold.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll always get these low scoring games. It is what it is. But I still think that sometimes these tight games can be fun to watch. It sucks though when you're watching and nobody's getting any fantasy production.
Yeah.
But I guess another point this week is that Julian Dominguez. Well, sorry, not on Nola Gold. But yeah, it's sometimes you get the low scoring weeks. It is what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, that's what and that's what I was kind of alluding to at the beginning about how this week really exemplified to me, at least with the scoring format that we have. But because we're limited to basically in our fantasy league, just any it's essentially scoring opportunities are turning into points. There's really
Yep.
nothing outside of scoring opportunities that we're calculating. So it's not surprising to see that, high scoring games equals a lot of fantasy points because that's just the nature of how our fantasy league is
Right.
built up. It's not really like fantasy football where you can still have guys that go off because it doesn't, guys can rack up yards, guys can rack up, receptions and things like that. And they can still get points without actually scoring tangible football points, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Whereas here in rugby, or at least in our fantasy rugby league, just because of the lack of resources that we have and the ability to realistically actually track some of these stats, as much as I would love to track, gain meters by a player every time they
Yeah.
touch the ball or ball carry meters, to be able to implement, those other sort of factors into our fantasy ethos would be really, really cool. We just can't do that right now. So
Yep.
that's why we have that such a big, I think, such a big disparity between when you have these low scoring games, you're really not going to have any points. I mean, in
No.
this Rugby Atlanta Nola game, the highest scored points was 5.8. And yes, that's going
Yep.
to make a difference in your fantasy matchup because in our fantasy rugby league period, it just doesn't have high scoring fantasy points. But when you're comparing that to games like the San Diego Legion, where you have high scores up in the mid teens, maybe even up to the 20s sometimes, it's hard to watch these games and be like, okay, I can enjoy this. This is fun. It's still fun to watch. It's just
Yep.
not as fun as watching, a 37-29 exciting matchup or a 31-16 matchup with the Guiltinis or
Yeah.
even a 2017 matchup or the Gilgronis matchup they're going to get to, which was a blast as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about how if we had the resources, how much different this would be if having tackles. A 9-14 game is suddenly rooting for one player, one player to get up and make another tackle, make another defensive stance.
Yeah.
But speaking more towards, what the fantasy points that we have, somebody to look at from this game is Damon Torres on
Yeah.
Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Back-to-back 5-point weeks. I'm starting to think, if you're looking at a guy who is scoring tries in even low scoring games, is scoring tries back-to-back weeks, that's promising. He's a free agent. That's somebody that is worth a look, worth a pickup maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe a shining light out of this low point scoring.
Yeah. And other guys in the 5-point range, Martini Talapusi as well, 5.8 points, back row player. And then Carl Meyer coming big with the 5.5 points. A lot of that coming off of the boot. And Wes, I believe, who owns him in our league, did not set him as the kicker. So he ended up, I think, only getting like 1 point out of all of that. So that's an interesting element as well.
I do like Carl Meyer, by the way. I like the way he looks. I like the way he's also not just a kicker, but also good with the ball in hand.
So. And I think that's what's going to be one of the big things here, Matt, about this fantasy setup. I think in other fantasy sports, because of the infrastructure that is put in place, you are able to get away with not watching games and are able to
Yeah.
just be on the fantasy app and be able to see, okay, how many points did he score this week? How many points did he score the next week? And you're able to do your research through that. But I think in our league, just because of the lack of infrastructure that's put in place for
Hmm.
MLR fantasy rugby, I think the people who watch games and the people who are really in tune with how they're using these players, not only just the fantasy points, but like what you're saying, what are the opportunities? How many times are they getting it in certain areas? Are they giving them opportunities off of set piece? Things like that. And I think when you watch the game, you'll be able to notice those things. Maybe not so much from a number perspective. But let's
Yep.
quickly move on, Matt, to Houston SaberCats Rugby New York. Not much to touch on here. I mean, there was no scoring until the second half. And I mean, you
Oh,
were talking about Sam Windsor was missing kicks that he should have been making, that he was making definitely last year as one of the leading point scorers.
yeah. I mean, let's cut him some slack. It just happened to be maybe the windiest day in Houston history. Um, so let's cut Sam Windsor some slack. It sucked that it had to happen to me the first week that I get to start Sam Windsor and have him as my kicker. But he'll bounce back. I'm sure he'll get points. Uh, One thing I do like from this matchup, though, even though it was low scoring, 0-0 at half, it was brutal to watch. Was that one? I think the Houston SaberCats might be a team that's coming back from a really tough year last year. I really like Christian Dyer. I know he had a good game fantasy wise, but I thought he looked good as well. The center for the SaberCats. I'm excited to see how Maroney, with more practice under his belt, looks in the coming weeks. And on the New York side, I mean, we were all waiting for Andrew Coe to score a try for Rugby Morning's sake, but unfortunately, that just wasn't the game this week. But he did look good as well. I thought he was good with the ball in hand. Was able to kind of make game line where he could. But yeah, that's basically all that I took. And I know you have something to say about John's bench decision. So
Yeah, well, let me first start off with the thing. So yes, we're very pumped up, and we're number one fans of Andrew Coe. You can check out the interview we had with him a few weeks ago, before the start of the season, about his thoughts and his mindset heading into his first professional season, his first season in the MLR, which was a lot of fun talking with him. But he did announce on that show that whoever drafted him would be able to select his try celebration, and I can confirm that Rugby Morning, Fitz, who drafted Andrew Coe in our fantasy rugby league, has selected a celebration. I have notified Andrew Coe, who has agreed to do that celebration. So whenever he scores that first try, we were pulling so hard for him in that first match, but just couldn't get past that try line. So hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe this next week he'll get that opportunity. But
yeah.
I will let the viewers know and the listeners know that that is set in stone so far. So hopefully, when we see Andrew Coe's first try, you guys will all see the try celebration that Rugby Morning, Fitz at Rugby Morning, has been able or was suggesting to him as a bonus for drafting him in our league. And I'm sure he'll like to reap the rewards from that extra 5 points from the try as well. So that being said, yeah, with this game, man, we talk about low scoring and we talk about not many fantasy points, but like we mentioned in the news and notes, when you're scoring 100% of your team's points in the rugby game, you're gonna have a lot of fantasy points, period. So Ed Fido coming huge in week 2 off of putting up a goose egg in week 1, 22.5 points, and I'm pretty sure, and I'm almost certain, that makes him, I believe, the number 1 player on the week. No, he's second, and I think you know who the first player is, but
Oh,
we'll
we
get to
know.
we'll get to that because you've been talking about him all season long so far. But yeah, I cannot believe this it doesn't hurt as bad because John didn't start him, or I should say John still won his matchup.
Yeah.
But he benched 22.5 points. He would have won the matchup single-handedly with Ed Fido. I think when you have a performance like that, like this is equivalent to like a Christian McCaffrey or like a Jonathan Taylor going out and scoring 50 points. Like this is like win you the week type deal. And he was on the bench. Luckily, John was still able to get away with the dub. But man, talk about double guessing yourself for the rest of the season about who you're starting.
I mean, that's the risk you take. I think with our league specifically and MLR and the way that we're scoring, it's what do you want? Do you want a guy that's going to get, okay, consistently maybe 1 to 3 points? Maybe he gets an assist every game, or where he's playing 80 minutes every game, or he's scoring a try, every other game, but it's on the goal line and it's not going to get you. It'll get you maybe 5.6 points, 5.7 points. Or do you start the guy that might goose egg some weeks, but then he's going to score 15, 12, 20 points some weeks. So that's the kind of decision you got to make. And that's why it makes it so hard to judge guys sometimes. I mean, you're benching a guy, but you don't know if that's the right decision. He can break out at any point and score, what was it, a 50-meter try that he scored. So,
I mean, it's true. I think that's the thing that after 2 weeks that has really been emphasized to me is like just the volatility of just this in general, just how I think the expectation needs to go in. You're not going to find many players. I mean, I'm just looking at the rank. Like, there's not many players like, Damon Torres who are going to score, 5 points every single week. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you're going to find that often, because then you're basically expecting a guy to score a try every single week. And I don't think that's feasibly possible. That's going to change as the rules change and more stats become available to us. But I think there is a sense here that you have to play your players with certain mentalities. Like you're saying, you're going to have that guy that can go off for a 50-meter try, and if you're losing, if you're heading into the final day down by 10, 15 points and you need a big score, maybe you swap out a guy. You send me a message saying, hey, I'm going to swap out this guy for this guy if you still have a guy that's remaining, just because he has that try scoring ability. Maybe that's something you consider when you're talking about putting someone or making a decision in your back flex spot. Maybe you have like a 9 there right now who will consistently get you try assists and maybe score you 4 to 6 points, but maybe you're down by 15 and you know what, I need to put a winger in there, I need to put a fullback in there, because those are the guys that are going to score the big time points. I think those are types of things that people are going to start to realize, our league members are going to start to realize as they start to go through this season more and more. But not much fantasy scoring in that that Rugby New York and Houston game outside of Ed Fido and some other some key guys. But we're gonna break down, and the rankings list, the full rankings list of all of these players is going to be released on our Discord channel. It should already, by the time this podcast is released and by the time the YouTube episode is released, the rankings should be up there for our Discord community members. So if you're not on our Discord, you can head out there. The link is on Reddit and on all of our social channels, so you can join through there. And then there you'll be able to have access to the PDF with the week rankings and as well as the total season rankings up to this point as well, which our league members will be using to make their waiver decisions on Thursday. So you guys can have a look at that as well. Last matchup here. Let's quickly touch on this as we move on to some waiver wires, which I know our league members are itching to hear about. Who are these top players that are still available in our league? But let's talk about this Gilgronis match, because I think out of the entire week, this was probably the match that I had the most fun watching, just because of the Austin Gilgronis.
Yeah, I mean, this is the second week. I mean, I'll say one thing: second week that the Old Glory DC kind of got spanked. So maybe that's a tough time for them. Tough time to have Old Glory players. But yeah, the Gilgronis, and I goofed it earlier, but Gilgronis is where my man, not on my team, unfortunately, Julian Dominguez is. And this guy continues, as I said last week, to be a beast.
Yeah, he looked good. He looked really, his ability to just break tackles and just gain those extra meters and able to find the try zone and all that. It was a lot of fun to watch. But I think the big thing that gets missed in his performance is the complement with Marcel Brach. The fullback on the Gilgronis. What he did in that match as well, he really stood out to me, and he scored 14.6 points. Julian Dominguez 16.3 points. So with my math there, actually Julian Dominguez, I believe, ended up being number 3 on the week. He's 1 on the season, but 3 on the week. It was Ed Fido that finished number 1 on the week on Rugby New York. So JJ did bench the number 1 guy, which doesn't usually happen in typical fantasy sports. But hey, this is where we are. This is the things we're learning in fantasy rugby. But back to Julian Domingos, Marcel Brash, 16.3 points, 14.6 points. They had a lot of fun. And talk about Connor Mooneyham too, man. I mean, the first round draft pick from a couple years ago. He looked good last season. He didn't play in that first match for whatever reason. And then coming out in week 2, obviously take it with a grain of salt because I think there was just tries going left and right at some points. And that's what you have to take with these big scoring games, is that I don't think that this big 57 points that they put up is indicative of how explosive the Gilgronis offense is. Yes, it is very explosive, but I do think, though, there is something to be said that in their first 2 matches where they put up, I guess 100 points with that news and note that we said at the top of the show, they did face Dallas. And they did face Old Glory DC, who's looking like they don't have the strongest defense. And Hokie in our league broke it down about, the what he's seeing from these defenses so far, because those do have a play in our fantasy league. I guess that's one of the aspects of it, that we're scoring points that doesn't have to do with necessarily scoring directly. So I think there is something to be said that the Gilgronis have faced 2 weaker defenses, but still, fantasy points are fantasy points. And when you have 3 guys on your squad that are putting up almost 15 points above.
3 guys that are in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rankings for the week. And I think what the people will see is just how many Gilgroni guys have been in the top 50, top 25 in fantasy points. It's you're definitely laughing if you have some of these guys and you're feeling good. But you're right. The matchups matter. The defense matters. And I think for some guys, you're going to have to play the matchup. And maybe this is the case for these as well.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more strategy going into it than, typical. There obviously is a lot of fantasy strategy in any sport, but I think just with all these different factors that we keep on mentioning with regards to the lack of information, just the volatility, the rules, all these things, it just takes that much more dedication from our league managers, which you guys are still in it. For you guys listening out there, you guys have been digesting this podcast. You guys have been enjoying the league, and I absolutely love it. And it keeps me going and keeps me punching through these numbers week in and week out. So I'm absolutely loving it. So it's great to see that everyone's having fun, especially after round 2 here with a lot of fantasy points scored in several of these matches, some not so much. But we'll see whether or not round 3 can add a little bit of excitement as well. But before we move on to a little bit of a league update here, Matt, any final thoughts on round 2, just general ideas and what you're looking forward to, I guess, moving forward?
I thought it was a good week. I was going to say this later in the show, but since you're asking for my thoughts now, don't know if we should say this while Vandy's here or not here, but I'm starting to think that charity that he's going to pay towards might be the San Diego Legion, so that they can buy a camera that's better than 240. So,
yeah, maybe that will be the good cause that we're going for. We've been preaching improving this broadcast quality on the rugby. I will say, round 2 was better. There wasn't any glitch outs. There wasn't any blackouts where we couldn't see games. So I was able to stat out everything. But that being said, some of the camera quality is not the best and could be improved. And hey, maybe.
And when we say some of the camera quality, we're really just talking to you, Legion. Like, if you're at home, maybe let's put a few extra bucks into maybe buying, an iPhone, put it on a stand, and that'll be better than what you have now.
If you had to guess, what do you think they're using right now?
They got to be using like a Polaroid, and they're just putting it out film by film.
It's a flip book. They got a flip book in front of the camera.
They've got a Nokia just sitting there, and one guy is like this going across because they can't zoom in very well, so they zoom in slowly.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe that will be the charity of choice. We'll see. To our league members, you got to win it. If that's the charity you want to donate to, I guess that's that much more motivation to win this league. The San Diego Legion, buy them a camera charity, I guess. So moving on here. Speaking about our league and its league members, as Commissioner Yee, I have a little bit of an announcement to make.
Hear ye, hear ye! Hear ye, hear ye!
Hear ye. That is right. It is Commissioner Yee's time to give the league an update about what is going on and some of my thoughts after 2 rounds of play. Well, before we get into it, let me give a little bit of an updated rundown here of how our league is doing after 2 rounds of play. Pretty close matchups here. John Lads on tour coming up with the big dub over the Tijuana Hookers, 18.1 points to 12.8. Big performances by Cliven Laubser and Will Chambers, giving them the win. Too bad Harrison Goddard with his 9.8 points couldn't come through for Tijuana Hookers. Rugby Morning, he was talking about it all week long leading up to the points reveal, but he knew he scored big off the back of Angus Cottrell and Mark O'Keefe, scoring 10.9 and 8.6 points respectively. And he took on Vandy this week, the Rucking Goat, who put up 17.7 points, so not a bad showing. It was largely off of Bjorn Basson, who scored 8.2 points of his own, but it wasn't enough to topple that big Rugby Morning performance, who now sits at 1-1. A little bit of a tough week for you, though, Maddie, taking on West, the Bing Bong Theory, who scored up 25.4 points. And it was looking okay for you up until I statted out Julian Dominguez, who scored 16.3 points of the week. That's 16.3 of the 25.4 that West put up this week. And that just goes to your point about how all it takes is one player to close it out. For you, it was the yellow cards by Ryberg and Trainer that really did it. But 17.1 points by Ben Mitchell was able to at least put you in the positive realm. Now we got to our last matchup, Victoria's Secret taking on Dankest Anchors. Dankest Anchors coming up with the big dub, 30 points off of a big performance in that Austin Gilgroni's Old Glory DC matchup, with Marcel Bratch coming through with 14.6 points. He also had Riekert Hadding and AJ Alatimu scoring 6 points of their own. And Victoria's Secret coming up short here by just under 10 points. The performances by Adrian Carls and Hanko Garmicius was not enough to get them the dub. So looking at the standings here of how we sit after 2 rounds of play, the Dankest Anchors is in the lead with sitting at a 2-0 record. Tijuana Hookers drops to 1-1 with the Rucking Goat also at 1-1. But guess who moves up into second place? That is 2-0. For Bing Bong Theory, he moves up 3 spots into second. So he sits just behind Hokie. West does, behind the Dankest Anchors. And then we look at some of the guys that were able to finally get into the win column. Rugby Morning able to get into the win column. Who else was able to get in? JJ, Lads on Tour, was able to get into the win column. Tough for Victoria's Secret, who falls again. So both you and Malcolm are sitting at 0-2 on the week, and it's tough because Malcolm is coming off of a tight matchup against Hokie in that first week, losing by under 2 points, and then now he loses 10 points to Dankest Anchors. Man, tough showing for him, and I guess also a tough showing for you there, Matt.
You know what? At least he's had a tight matchup. At least he made it into the double digits. I'm really happy for him to be the better 0-2 team. And it's tough at the bottom, but hey, you got to start at the bottom to get to the top, right?
There we go. Yeah, no, it was definitely an interesting one. So there's the standings. As we said, those will be posted in our Discord channel and on socials to have a distinct look. But that is where our league sits. And now we have a couple announcements here to make. Some housekeeping stuff. Sometimes the commissioner's got to play dad, Matt, and sometimes I got to come in and make sure all of you crazy league members are following the rules and are abiding by all of the things that I'm laying down to make sure this league runs smoothly. And so far, it's been absolutely great. And I think this league, more so than any other fantasy league, really requires the buying in of its league members. And all 8 of you have done a fantastic job of doing that. Has made my job a lot easier and a lot more fun to do that. So keep it going, keep it moving forward. But I just got a couple of reminders here that I noticed after 2 rounds of play. First thing, guys, make sure you guys are sending me your lineups before the kickoff of the first match of the week. So this week, the first matchup is on Friday night. So make sure you are sending me your lineups with your designated kicker. I know that's a big one that people forget sometimes, is to make sure to designate your kicker. Make sure you put that into your lineup as well, and to send that to me by kickoff of the first match. I know a couple of you were a little bit late heading in. I have a little bit of leniency, but moving forward, we're going to get a little bit more strict with that, and we are thinking about enforcing penalties. The penalties that we were thinking, if your lineup isn't set, I'm going to just put in the same lineup that you had last week, but that is up for discussion.
We're
But before we
locking
go
down the
there,
rules, boys.
we're locking down the rules, but just make sure that that you guys are sending in your lineups. You guys have been great so far, but I just don't want any ambiguity going forward, just in case anything happens. And then just remember, there are a lot of last minute lineup changes that happen in the MLR. So make sure on match days that you guys are watching it. I noticed that some of you, I know some of it you guys just don't have any replacements, but some of you did play players that just did not end up dressing. And like I said, if the player does not dress in his match, you are allowed to swap him for a player that has yet to play. However, if the player does dress, if the player is a sub, that still counts. You cannot swap him out. The only reason why you would be able to swap out a player is if he is in your lineup and does not dress. So
You can swap him on the bench before you swap him a guy from your bench if he hasn't played yet, right?
Yeah. You can swap anyone if they haven't played yet. But if a guy has played in your lineup, the only time that you can swap him out with anyone, whether that's picking someone up or swapping him with someone on your bench, it has to be a guy that has not played for a guy who does not dress. So those are just some key reminders
for
an
unofficial rule that did not come from the commissioner and comes from only me. If you're playing me, don't set your lineup.
Oh, come on. Don't go there,
Don't
man.
play guys that are playing. Let me get my first dub and let me get the ball rolling a little. Just do that.
Well, maybe as I set up the matchups this weekend, and I did notice that I know some of you out there, I don't have round 3 posted yet, but I do have the matchup set for the rest of the year.
He's trying to make me lose, guys.
I know some of you were saying, oh, maybe he just chooses the matchups on a week. It's fun to not know. No, I do have the matchup set for the rest of the year. I just don't have it posted on our spreadsheet. But with that being said, I guess we'll find out. You guys will find out who is taking and going to get, I guess, an easy dub against Ruck and Roll. It's been that way for the past 2 rounds. I guess we'll see and find out. But last big, 2 big announcements, I should say. I'm officially announcing an emergency rule proposal to our league members. I am going to post this as a poll in our channel. This will go into effect moving forward after round 3 if it is accepted by our league members. And remember, that needs a 5-3 majority vote in order to pass. And this is a rule that I have noticed as I'm statting out these games, and it has to do with the minutes played. And my proposal is to eliminate the 70 minutes played half point scoring. And that is only because the sources that I'm using, and honestly, sometimes these broadcasts that I'm watching do not accurately depict, or sometimes they miss a guy getting subbed out. So it's hard to find those 70+ minute players. And sometimes when you just can't find them, I have to side with the fact that if I don't see them in those final 10 minutes, I have to just assume that they're not on the field and didn't play that 70 minutes, which doesn't always happen, because sometimes there's a guy that slips through the cracks that ends up being on the field and gets subbed out, and you just don't even know. So to eliminate that ambiguity and to eliminate that kind of gray area, I'm suggesting that we remove the 70 minutes plus. It's easier for me to just calculate the 80 minutes plus, because I can look at the guys who are still on the field at the end of the match and I can count those guys out. So it's easy for me to determine that. But it's a little bit harder with the 70-minute plus. I will leave it up to the league members to decide whether or not they want to move forward with that. But that is just my point of view. I'm good either way. I can continue to calculate the 70-minute plus, but just understand there is going to be a little bit of a gray area from week in and week out. And who knows, 0.5 points can come really big on a week. So I just don't want to leave it up to chance here when those matchups get close. So that is a proposal that I will be posting in the Discord channel if it is not already up in our league Discord for our league members to vote on. So that is something there. And our final announcement before we head into the round 3 waiver wire and the overall match preview heading into round 3 is just that I am officially announcing that there will be a player database being uploaded to a Google sheet that all of our league members will have access to. This sheet includes the points scored overall, weekly points, each stat broken down by the number of whatever they got. It'll have total tries, total try assists. It'll have their free agent status or who they're owned by in terms of the fantasy team, and also the position, of course, and the team that they actually play for. So that is something that will be coming out shortly. I know that's going to be a huge tool for
Yep.
all of our league members out there. I know there have been a lot of questions about the points that people have scored, who's available, who's not available. So I will have that ready for league members, hopefully before you make your waiver wire claims later on Thursday night. So with that being said, let's move on to round 3 waiver wire, Matt. A lot of big names here that could be
Yep.
available. I think the big question, just the same question that I asked last week, is when do fantasy managers hit the panic button on certain players, and when do they start turning over their teams? Because we know in any fantasy sport, you're not going to win your leagues at the draft. It's going to be trades, it's going to be roster moves, it's going to be waiver wire pickups that are going to become big. And there are certain teams in our league that have already hopped on to that mentality. I mean, we have Dankus Anchors, Hokie. He's been making a bunch of roster moves. Wes,
Yeah.
He's sitting at 2-0. He's made a bunch of roster moves with Bing Bong Theory. And then there's some guys that are still winning that haven't made any roster moves. I mean, Vandy's coming off of a loss this week, but off of his first week, he was able to come off a win, and he hasn't made any roster moves as of yet so far. So kind of your mentality with your team and just overall about your mindset when it comes to roster moves and waiver wires heading into round 3.
Yeah, and I won't go too much into it. We got to keep it moving, but I think that I'm going to be, continuing to see who's not performing, who's not really getting into the lineups, maybe who's not consistently starting. I think if they're not into the lineups now, I think personally it's time to drop them, time to kind of look for somebody who's going to get you at least 80 minutes or at least gets you some points.
And I think the big thing too, Matt, is that, to go back to your same point, because I think it's a huge thing to emphasize, is to cut the guys that you see with your own eyes that just aren't being involved or having the involvement that you initially sought for when you were drafting these guys. Because I feel like the name value is going to become very big here, and sometimes that may put guys into a pickle who may hold on to a guy for too long.
Yeah, frankly, they're just not in the lineup. I mean, there's guys that were drafted that, you've come week 1, come week 2, they're still not in the lineup. Okay, like it's time to jump ship, and it's time to, that they'll be there until they actually get put into the lineup. Then you can make a decision then.
And I'm not saying that, certain guys, obviously these big name guys, are because they haven't performed yet, just drop them. Obviously, I'm not saying that. But an example that does kind of resonate with me, that kind of, I guess, puts the point across, is look at Mike Teo, for example, on Utah, right? He was the number 1 pick in our fantasy draft.
Yeah.
Now, they moved him last year. He played a majority of his matches at fullback position, having a lot more free reign to get involved in the offense, to get involved in the line, to get involved in line breaks. But for the past 2 matches, he's been on the wing, and you can clearly see that has diminished his fantasy output as of so far, at least to what we compare to last season. Now, I will say he should have had a big time try in that first match after offloading it off, I think at like the 22 or something, and giving off when he really didn't need to. But it's things like that where situations have changed from last year. People are on different teams. People are playing different positions.
Yeah.
All these different factors, and game styles have changed, game plans. All of these things are moving factors that have affected the way that players are performing this season so far. So I think is something that needs to be taken into note. But with that being said, and with all that in mind, let's look at who are the top players after 2 rounds who are available in our league. And the top guy right now, he's a back 3 player, plays for DC. A majority of his points came off of that last round 2 match because it was 2 tries that he scored. But Renata Roberts Tanana, he's scoring 12.7 points in total this season, 12.3 in that second round matchup. Back 3 player, seems to be involved. He was drafted but dropped. I believe he was drafted by, I want to say Hokie, who drafted him, but now he's a free agent. Any interest there?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the first game. I remember seeing him getting involved. Obviously, didn't put up any tries, and it's encouraging to see him put up points in a pretty big losing effort. I think that's encouraging. I think back three is something that guys have a lot of.
Yeah.
Maybe not me, because clearly my back three isn't working, but for everybody else, I think it's somewhere where people are finding points for sure. I think some of the guys are not, just looking farther down the list. Um, I talked about him earlier, but Christian Dyer, the center on Austin, I think he looks good. I think he's getting the ball a lot as well.
Yep,
Um,
8.2 total
yeah,
fantasy points on the season. He's sitting at, I believe, 32nd overall with those 8.2 points. So,
yeah,
and he is the, I believe, 8th best free agent available right now. And yes, he is a
yeah.
center position.
Yeah, and another guy that is on there on the list. I mean, Jake Turnbull getting a front
Mm-hmm.
row that is putting up 5.7 points in the first week, 5.6 points in the second week.
Yep.
Having that at your front row position, that is a game changer right there. And I can see guys putting claims on him, putting some fab money down for him. Whether I put fab money down for him, I guess that's for the league to find out. But him, and then
Well,
along with
it seems like, for at least for Jake Turnbull, like that is the kind of the marquee. I think that's the perfect point, is that you'll see a lot of back three players, I think, throughout the season start to climb up this free agent list, just because of the nature of how back three players are going to score more points, just because
Yep,
they have the more opportunity to score. And I think, to your point, I think a lot of teams, at least in our league, are filled at that back three position and are content with the point output that they're giving. So it's going to be guys like Jake Turnbull, who you're mentioning. It's going to be guys like Christian Dyer, who at these kind of obscure front row center positions, who don't often see a lot of points. If you can get that leg up, like we mentioned
yeah,
earlier in the show, and have that positional advantage, I think it will go a long way. So yeah,
for
those are
sure.
two huge names that I think are going to be big pickups.
Yeah,
Just to mention other guys that are still standing there. Jerry Lubashagne, he's on Houston. He's still sitting up there. He's 14th overall on the season ranking. He has 12.1 points on the season, but remember that majority of those points came in that first round matchup. He did not get, I believe, any points in round two. He only got 1 point for playing the full 80 minute match. So there is that. And I think that's something to keep in mind too here with these total points, is that these points come in spurts. Right, it's not going to be a consistent like 5 points. It's very rare that you're going to see
yeah,
that from a player, at least for the entire 18-week
for
season. You might
sure.
see it for a few matches in a row, but you're not going to see it consistently. So you need to keep that in mind too. Are these points coming in big bunches, or are you seeing, it's a consistent, 2, 4 type deal? So just to roll down the list, and like I said, the rankings and the waiver wire rankings will be released on our Discord channel, but the top 10 free agents that are in our league right now, who are available for our waiver wire pickups that are going to be processed Thursday night and go through Friday morning. Renata Roberts Tanana sitting at 12.7 points, back three player for DC. Jerry Lubashagne, back three for Houston, 12.1 points. Jake Turnbull, who Matthew mentioned, front rower for Austin. Austin White, back three player for Rugby Atlanta with 11.1 points. Damon Torres is there, another player for Rugby Atlanta. He's a back rower, so maybe that's a guy that you're looking at,
Yep,
because,
consistent too.
consistent so far after 2 rounds of play. Back rowers don't necessarily tend to get a lot of points here. So maybe that's someone you're looking to. Chad Go, he did well too. Front rower for Utah, 9 points. So we are seeing a little bit of more, I think, positional diversity here in this waiver wire pickup as
Yep.
opposed to last week. And then just to round out the list, Conrad Aurora, he's coming off of a big week. His points, I think, first points and first start of the year in this matchup. And then you mentioned Christian Dyer, Nick Feeks, and then Duncan Matthews, 7.3, 6.6 points respectively. And then, I mean, just outside the top 10, I got to mention it, Will Kelly, because he's our guy. He's
Yeah,
in there with 6.5 points. He most of that coming off of his boot, but he is up there as well.
yep,
So that rounds out the waiver wires, and I want to mention, right, before we move on to a quick little round three kind of preview here, just as an overall, just overarching thoughts heading into this third round, is, hey, these waiver wire pickups, they pay off and they also don't pay off. I mean, and it doesn't even have to be waiver wire. I mean, we talk about you, Matt, how you picked up Ben Mitchell. He came through for you this week. I mean, if
Came
your
through.
other guys did somewhat adequate, you might have one this week because of Ben Mitchell, who was a pickup. Someone who was a big pickup for Dankus Anchors. I mean, you talk about Adrian, for Victoria's Secret, Adrian Carls. He needed a kicker. He came through for him, 9.5 points. He lost his week, but still, big pickup. And then
Yep.
you look at some other big pickups. I mean, on the flip side of the token, you had Rugby Morning, who spent an arm and a leg for Joaquin de la Vega Mendia, the star of that first round.
Yeah, we didn't even mention him today.
Didn't even mention him today. Only got 2 points on the week. So there's the volatility that we're talking about. So just keep that in mind as well. I'm interested to see, I guess, how much more hesitant people are to drop waiver wire fab on these players because of the volatility that they've seen after round one of those budgets not paying off.
Yeah, and clearly he didn't watch the show up to the point where I said that his points were skewed. I said, I'm not touching him because his points are skewed, but hey. Yeah, that's all right. You don't want to take my opinion from a guy who's 0-2. I get it. That's fine. But hey, you do your thing. I'm gonna do mine.
Well, hey, that's what this show's all about. Hey, you just gotta say your 2 cents, and if the people want to take it, the people want to take it. If not, they do their own thing. And hey, who knows if this is the right way that we're doing? Because we don't even know. We're still testing the waters. So,
but all I'm saying is just wait till Dyer and Turnbull, they both go off because I said that they're going to go off like I said Ben Mitchell would.
There we go. I mean, to be fair, you are pretty on point with your waiver wires, or even just like denoting the guys that have been doing well. I mean, you called Julian Dominguez after watching that first match. He goes off again. You called Ben Mitchell. You called those other guys. We'll see whether or not your waiver wire pickups this week are also going to pull through, because man, maybe we got to start calling you the waiver wire guru. And I'll let you run.
Let me get one win
this
first.
segment, and I'll let you run this segment first, and then we'll see. Yeah. I guess we got to get you the dub first, because what credibility do you have if you're making these good calls and you have nothing to show for
there we go.
Who knows? But let's quickly go into the round 3 match preview. Let's not spend too much time with this. Let's just go through all the matchups and kind of who you're looking most forward to watching. I feel like we got a lot of good matchups. Old Glory DC taking off New England Free Jacks off the bye. We'll see whether or not DC can get in the win column. We'll see if New England Free Jacks can stay undefeated. Rugby New York has their second matchup against Rugby Atlanta. That's a big one. I mean, this is an Eastern Conference matchup that could very well be one that we're seeing in playoff time.
I mean, it's a rematch from last year's Eastern Conference Championship.
It is.
I would like
they're both undefeated going into this last match or into this third round match.
I would like to see New York playing in a place where there's not 700-kilometer-per-hour winds. So that'll be nice.
Windsor knocking a few kicks.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, just maybe. We'll see. And hopefully see Andrew Coe score that first try.
That too.
Man, we are pulling for him, and hopefully we got our fingers crossed, and we're rooting for him, because just as he is, I guess, a fan of the show, we're a fan of his. So we'll keep on supporting him. Nola Gold taking on the Toronto Arrows, 2 winless teams. One of them is expected, at least, unless they tie, to get into the win column. So we'll see whether or not. I don't know. I feel like both of these teams, they're not winless teams. I feel like both of these teams are better than what they have shown so far.
For sure.
But, I mean, we will see. Dallas Jackals, they're still trying to figure things out. Tough match against who is it that they played? In that
San Diego,
fun, exciting San Diego match, and then we have the San Diego Legion taking on the Seattle Seawolves in another undefeated matchup to see who stays, I guess, in the win column going forward after that. And then we also have the Gilgronis and the Utah Warriors, kind of 2 opposite spectrums. We'll see whether or not Vandy can finally get that first dub for his team, because he was talking all that crap to start the season about how if he picks whatever team that I get picked to, they're going to just start winning. Well,
clearly it's the opposite there, Vandy.
Clearly, exactly. Clearly it's the opposite. They're 0-2, but we'll see whether or not they can take on a Gilgronis team. And hey, the Utah Warriors, I will say, they looked pretty decent, and they definitely could have won that first match against the Seattle Seawolves in round 2. And I think this will test whether or not the Gilgronis are the real deal, because I think the Utah Warriors are an adequate opponent.
Mhm.
They're also not a team that I think is indicative of their 0-2 record. So we'll see whether or not the Gilgronis are the real thing, and whether or not what they displayed in the first 2 weeks, scoring the fastest team to score 100 points to start a season. We'll see whether or not they can keep that going against the Utah Warriors, who are still looking for the first dub. But out of all those matches, Matt, what are you looking most forward to? And even from I guess from a fantasy perspective, what are you keeping an eye out for and adapting to as we all still try to figure out this whole fantasy MLR thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Going
gonna
forward.
keep an eye on the Gilgronis back three. Those are guys that, again, we talked about the matchup. If they can keep it going against Utah Warriors, I think that's pretty promising. Outside of Dominguez, obviously, because we know that he's going to kill it. I'm going to keep an eye on the SaberCats too. I want to see how they are against. I mean, if they really put Dallas Jackals and really give them a good beating, then maybe we're looking at Houston as a real deal. And I'm hoping to see Marcus Maroney also get some minutes. And
Yeah.
then the only other one, and I kind of already talked about it, was Rugby New York or Rugby New Jersey. See how they play. See how they do second week after the first week bye. I want to see how they are outside of the terrible conditions in Houston.
Yeah. I don't think, because I think there were a lot of high expectations for Rugby New York heading into the season, and I wouldn't put that first match with the conditions and everything. I would not put that and say that's what we're going to be seeing from Rugby New York for the rest of the season, because I
And
think
the
they're
big
a really
thing
good team.
is, I don't think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think San Diego Legion is at home this week. So
I'll have to
maybe
check.
we'll get to see the number of the players and the actual design
I
of the
actually think
jerseys.
that the Legion are home.
Oh
So not
my
yet.
gosh.
Not yet. But I will say, I will thank the Gilgronis for making that change. I don't know what the whole deal is. The Giltinis do this too, and luckily they're on bye. It makes my life so much harder trying to stat out these games, but I have no idea why. And I don't even from a design standpoint, even outside of me, like the selfish, like me thinking fantasy wise
Yeah.
and trying to stat out these games, I just don't agree with the look of having the same color number on the jersey, just having the outline. It makes no sense to me. It just
Yeah.
looks silly. At least the Gilgronis were able to realize that and made that change, made it easier for me. But yeah, the Giltinis and the San Diego Legion, I guess, are still trying to figure out, or they still think it looks cool. So I think we have some differing opinions on that. But for me, at least from a fantasy perspective, what I'm watching out for, at least for everyone, is, are the lineups going to start to level out and start to show some consistency? Because I think as soon as we start to see that consistency is when fantasy managers are going to feel more comfortable with their lineups,
Yep.
and being able to select some guys and even pickups. Once we start seeing guys being involved in these lineups on a regular basis and seeing how they facilitate themselves and how they operate within these game plans that these teams have, will there be some consistency moving forward, and will that lead into some bigger pickups? Will that lead
Mm-hmm.
into some interesting lineup settings? I don't know. I think that will be a big one as well. And I think that's just the biggest overarching thing. And whether or not, I think if we can get, I think, the same output without a silly 10-7 or 16-7 game from some of these teams, I think we'll have a pretty good fantasy round, because I feel like week in and week out we're continuing to improve. I mean, round one, Matt, you can give me your thoughts on this. Round one had a little bit of broadcasting issues, had a little bit here and there, but the games were pretty decent. We had some exciting matchups. Then round two, the broadcasting improves. You throw in some not so exciting matchups in there, but then we get treated with a couple. So we are making improvements, at least from a fantasy perspective, after 2 weeks here heading into the MLR season.
Yep.
Yeah, so it should be good. I'm really excited for round three. I don't think anything changes so far. I think in terms of outside that rule proposal, I think everything has been absolutely brilliant and operating so smoothly so far. So thank you again to all of our league members who have been a big part of that. And I cannot stress this enough, that your guys's love and passion and just the enjoyment that you guys are showing and interacting in the Discord community and everything has been a lot of fun to watch and keeps me going and doing this. So I love that. And then also all of our community members who are not in the league and are having a lot of fun and generating discussion and asking questions and really engaging in the posts that we have on social media. It really does mean a lot. And we hope that we can continue to grow the viewership, hope to continue to grow the fantasy MLR community, and also continue to grow the subscribership on our YouTube channel and on our podcast to hopefully just get more people involved in the fantasy rugby discussion. And hopefully with more people, we'll finally be able to achieve that goal of making fantasy rugby a reality in
Yes,
the
sir.
MLR. So with that being said, Matt, if you don't have any last notes,
Whoa. So are we just not going to replace Vandy's hot mic with a good old hot mic from me?
Oh, okay, so you got a hot mic. You have something to get off your chest, Matt? Do you have
I've
something
always got at 0-2. There's a lot to get off the chest, but this is my chance to really take his spot and puff out my chest and have a say in this show.
All right. I think I can spare you a minute here. So here,
I
let's
appreciate
do
that.
that. Let me switch up a couple things here. Instead of Vandy's hot mic, let's get Maddie's hot mic in here.
Oh,
And why
yeah.
don't you tell me what's on your mind, buddy?
Oh, yeah. All right. So here's my big hot mic. And I think Hokey brought it up in the chat, or if it wasn't Hokey, it was somebody else in our league. But MLR, gosh, you guys implement all these rules to try and speed the game up. You got a kick clock of 1 minute when no kicker ever takes over 1 minute. You got these take away the conversion for tries under the post, but then you go and take a 1 minute water break every 20 minutes. What's up with that? I got to know what's up with that. I don't get it. I don't get it. Why you got to give these guys a break? I mean, I saw some players in the MLR trying to Americanize rugby. No. Rugby is good enough on its own. Let's keep it that way and quit trying to change the game. That's all I got.
There we go. That well put, Matt. Yeah, I don't know. The water break is kind of quirky and it's such a North American thing. But you've been preaching this since day one of this podcast, so I don't know, man. Keep preaching to the choir, and hopefully a change will happen. Because hey, maybe we can have some pull here. Maybe.
I mean, I'll keep preaching, but MLR, we love you, and we need you to give us some more stats, please. We love you, though.
I would say that is probably the bigger thing, is that if it costs me to give you guys water breaks, that's okay. Just give me some stats, give me some meter gain or ball carrying meters.
Maybe some tackles here and there.
Some tackles here and there. That'd be pretty good to keep this fantasy going.
And before you close it off, Ryan, and before we end up the show, just want to say Super Rugby starting this weekend. I know it's not MLR, but I wore this jersey in honor of the Canes playing this weekend against Crusaders. Good luck to the boys.
I should have put my Chiefs jersey in the background.
Well,
man. How can you caught me off guard with this?
Jersey. So
there we go.
We're cheering for all the boys, and we'll be watching that alongside MLR. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
It should be a lot of fun. I mean, now, and we mentioned it at the top, in the middle of the show. Super Bowl is done. Football season is done. So all you football fans, come on over. Come on, scoot on over. You miss a little bit of physicality.
Even baseball fans.
Even baseball.
Because there's no baseball anymore.
There's no baseball. But Super Bowl, the Super Bowl is done. Come on over. Come enjoy some fantasy rugby. You're missing fantasy football. Come over to the MLR. Enjoy some fantasy rugby over here, and we'll try to grow this thing. But you're right, man. It's all about rugby here on out for the next at least 15 to 18 weeks here. We got, like you said, we got MLR going now full swing. We're heading into round 3. Super pumped up for that. We got Super Rugby coming up this week. And hey, I had to wear my my quarter zip as well. I'm not a Welsh fan, but it seems like Six Nations is absolutely bonkers right now. It seems like everyone's beating on everybody. So that's been a lot of fun to watch as well. So yeah, lots of rugby. Couldn't be happier, but definitely the MLR is on the top of that list. So if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you do that, especially if you're a rugby fan or you want to become a rugby fan. So with that being said, for my co-host Matthew Yee, and for the co-host that's not here but will be here next episode, Devin Vandepoele, I am Ryan Yee. Thank you for tuning in to episode 6 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. We'll be back.
Peace out.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.